Hey guys, it's Mr. Schmidt here, and in this video we're going to start a new unit where basically from this point on until at least the end of this 9 weeks, when you're watching this originally, we're going to look at firms and the idea of firms producing product to make a profit, and basically how do they maximize profit and how do different types of firms approach that issue. So the basic idea here is to earn a profit, firms have to make products or output from resources, which you learned in Unit 1 are called inputs. Now there are two types of resources I want to focus on here, and I'm not talking about labor, capital, and land. I'm talking about fixed resources, which are resources that don't change with the quantity produced, i.e. a factory. In other words, it's really hard, say you're producing 7 trucks versus 20 trucks, to suddenly have more factories as you're producing more trucks. Like, you just can't suddenly build a new factory. And so any resource that is fixed means it cannot change or does not change as you're producing more product from that resource, right? So even though I'm producing more and more trucks, the number of factories I have would stay the same. Whereas a variable resource, and I spelled the word variable wrong, I just noticed that, sorry about that. Let's correct that. You would think I would figure that out. Variable resources are resources that do change with the quantity produced, okay? So like workers, right? If I have more workers, in theory, my quantity produced should be increasing, right? So as I'm producing more output, more and more workers can be hired, right? Like, it's very easy to add more workers, right? So part of the difference between fixed and variable resources is how easy is it to increase the number of that resource as you're producing more product. It's much easier to hire a worker than it is to build another factory. So that's the difference. Now, a really key important part of this is the law of diminishing marginal returns, which says that as variable resources are added to fixed resources, the additional output produced from each additional worker, marginal product, which we'll talk about in a minute, will eventually decrease. In other words, think of it this way. If you have a company and you aren't producing any product, right? You have zero output, right? So we can make a chart here of labor and then Q for output. And so maybe with 0 workers, there's zero output. When I add one worker, boy, they're going to add a lot to the company because they're the only worker, right? So maybe output jumps to 5 units. And then when I add the second worker, oh man, they add even more. Now the 2 workers can get together, collaborate. Maybe it jumps up to 20 units, right? And then maybe the third worker adds even more, and so now you're up to 50 units, right? And so you're really cooking here, right? But eventually you're going to start adding workers, and they're going to have less and less to do, right? Because all the tasks are being done. And so eventually you have workers who are sitting around, they have nothing to do. Imagine a busy kitchen, right? Where you have all these cooks and they're working and they're making the food, and then you throw in another person. It kind of messes things up. A really good example of this that I actually just thought of as I'm recording this is the movie Ratatouille. I don't know if you've seen Ratatouille, but in the movie, it basically portrays a French restaurant, and they're working like clockwork. And then you bring in this new guy who has no idea what he's doing, and it just throws everything off, right? He has nothing to do. Yes, partly because of his ineptitude, but also because that kitchen was already working really, really well. And so that's the idea of the law of diminishing marginal returns. It's actually very similar to the law of diminishing marginal utility that we learned about in Unit 1. That is, you do something more and more and more, the additional satisfaction, the marginal utility starts to decrease, because at some point you just get sick of that activity, right? I'm tired of the pizza. I'm tired of seeing the movies, whatever the case may be. So that's the idea of the law of diminishing marginal utility. Just want to make sure I didn't have anything else I wanted to say beyond that. So again, it's a corollary to the law of diminishing marginal returns. Same thing as marginal utility. The more and more I do something, the less and less I get out of it. In this case, product as opposed to utility being satisfaction. So that's all for this video on the law of diminishing marginal returns. Until next time, have a great day.